a neurological condition and knows no racial, national or geographical boundaries. Those affected by epilepsy often suffer physical, emotional and social consequences. Epilepsy is the disease of seizures. Seizures can create misunderstandings, fear, secrecy and even stigma. Now, the stigma of epilepsy can discourage people from seeking treatment and has a negative consequences for the quality of life and social inclusion. Misinformation and epilepsy stereotypes often prevent people with this seizure disorder from getting the required and relevant care. Awareness regarding epilepsy helps bring more attention to the diagnostic and treatment difficulties related to this condition. Every year on the second Monday of February, people come together to acknowledge and highlight the problems faced by people with epilepsy, their families and careers. So today on the program, we have with us experts who will share their advice on the management of epilepsy. Joining us on the show today, we have Dr. Vangama, President of Indian Epilepsy Association, Dr. M.M. Mehendiratha, President, Indian Epilepsy Society, Dr. P. Satish Chandra, President-elect, Indian Epilepsy Association, Professor Helen Cross, President, International League Against Epilepsy, and Dr. Gagandeep Singh, Secretary, Indian Epilepsy Association, and Dr. Manjari Tripathi, Secretary, Indian Epilepsy Society. Thank you so much, all of you, all the doctors, for joining us on this program to talk about this very, very important issue. And I'd like to start with you, Dr. Chandra. Very simple question to explain to our viewers just what is epilepsy and how common is it?
Epilepsy is a tendency to recurrent spontaneous seizure, which is due to an abnormal electrical discharges which can arise from entire brain or part of the brain. And this seizure can occur at any time with or without warning, and hence it is dangerous, and sometimes it leads to problems while driving or cooking. That has to be remembered. This epilepsy affects about 50 million people around the globe, and about 12 million people are affected within this country in India. And it is the fourth most common disability causing neurological disorder in India.
All right, fourth most common in India. So, Dr. Mehendiratha, what is the usual treatment for epilepsy?
The mainstay treatment is medicines. The principal treatment is in the form of oral formulation. Sometimes these can also be given as intravenous or by the nasal route. There had been large number of medicines available starting from 1860 to 2022. There are 6 medications available before 1990. And after that, there had been a tremendous explosion of treatment available, safer, with lesser side effects, and there are now new kids on the block which are easily available. All these medicines are without any difficulty available in our country and are much more economical than the Americas and Europe. Thank you.
All right, good to know that it's, more economical and accessible, these medications. In fact, that was my next question. Dr. Vangama, how expensive or inexpensive are these medicines used for the treatment of epilepsy?
Overall, good seizure control can be achieved with rational anti-epileptic drug treatment, which is both inexpensive and effective. A good range of effective drugs are available for treatment of epilepsy in India, which are approved by Government of India at affordable price. Both older and newer drugs are comparable in efficacy. Older drugs are much cheaper and widely available across the country. The newer drugs are little expensive but cause very few adverse effects.
All right, Dr. Cross, if you could, elaborate on that. How effective are these epilepsy therapies?
I think if the medication is available and the right medication is used, we know about 70% of individuals with epilepsy respond to those anti-epileptic drugs. However, there are many different types of epilepsy. There are many different types of epileptic seizure. Epilepsy itself is a symptom of many different causes, and different individuals will respond to different anti-epileptic drugs. There is also the concern sometimes about side effects, and some individuals will get side effects to one drug but not another. So there is a need for different anti-epileptic drugs to try and find the right treatment in each individual.
All right. Dr. Manjari, what is your message to people with epilepsy who are using epilepsy medicine?
See, it is, one has to emphasize that taking the medicines at the prescribed dose and the set time as advised by the neurologist is very, very important. Now, the treatment of epilepsy with these medicines is usually long. It's over many years. And it is but natural that a person with epilepsy, may forget to take their dose. But this is, a difficult situation because what is unique for epilepsy is that most of these medicines, their action lasts for just about 12 hours. So if a person with epilepsy misses a single dose, there can be a breakthrough seizure. And hence, the most important message I have to give is that the medicine must be taken by reminder alarms on the mobile or supervised by the caregiver in the case of children so that there are no breakthrough seizures at the correct dose at the prescribed time.
All right, so that's very important. And Dr. Gagandeep, I'd like you to talk more about that. People with epilepsy do have seizures. So what are the major medical consequences of having seizures time and again?
So that's a very important question. And people with epilepsy can get injured or even die during seizures. In fact, the risk of death during seizures is about 1%. If people have very prolonged seizures, and these are known as status epilepticus, the risk of death actually increases. Furthermore, if someone is driving and has a seizure during driving, he can have an accident or injury. And likewise, in the villages, if someone is cooking in an open fireplace, there can be a fire accident. So there is one condition known as SUDEP, which is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And this is basically an unwitnessed death in someone with epilepsy. So world over, about 125,000 people with epilepsy die every year, and 80% of these deaths are in low and middle income countries. What is important and gratifying to note is that simply controlling seizures with effective epilepsy medicines can prevent these deaths.
All right, and that's why it's really important to create awareness about epilepsy and its treatment. Dr. Chandra, if you could talk a little more about the social consequences or ramifications of epilepsy.
Epilepsy is a chronic neurological disorder similar to other disorders. It is a medical condition. However, it has a lot of social implications and ramifications because the people living with epilepsy perceive this even today as a lot of myths and misconceptions. And they are thinking that it could be due to some these evil spirits or supernatural powers, and so many things are there in the minds of the people. Hence, there is a lot of problems in their day-to-day life. These people living with epilepsy may have a problem in the schooling or at the time of marriage or even securing an employment. For example, in the schooling, when they are going to the school because of these epilepsy, there are a lot of hindrances. The people may not reject them, and there could be difficult in making the friends. For example, with respect to the marriage, they may have a difficulty in finding the suitable people for their marriage, or even securing an employment is very, very difficult for these people. Hence, this epilepsy has got a lot of socio-cultural problem and ramifications, and hence one need to be aware of these things for management of epilepsy, apart from the medical treatment.
Right, and people need to be aware that it can be managed and people can, go ahead and live their lives. Dr. Cross, what are some of the major gaps in epilepsy at a global level, and what are, bodies such as the World Health Organization and the International League Against Epilepsy doing to address these gaps?
So the most important thing with individuals with epilepsy is diagnosis and getting an accurate diagnosis, and also then the right treatment. And although we have many different treatments, there is still a gap in epilepsy treatment, the epilepsy treatment gap, not only in the treatment, but also in making an accurate diagnosis. So and this particular gap is variable around the world. It's seen particularly in low and middle income countries, but to certain degrees is seen in other places as well. So what we strive to do is, yes, we need to educate professionals to make sure that there is an appropriate diagnosis, the appropriate tools to make a diagnosis, also what investigations might be required, delivery of services, but also address the availability of anti-epileptic medications. The World Health Organization has a list of essential medicines on which anti-epileptic medications are there. They also have the MHGAP guidelines on treatment of epilepsy, but there is still the education that needs to go alongside that, and also discussion at a local level with regard to the availability and delivery of services with regard to these things.
Right. Dr. Gagandeep, if you could, tell us about the policy measures which apply specifically to India.
Yeah, so there are about 10 to 12 million people with epilepsy in this country, and roughly half of them are not on treatment. And if we have to ensure that these people get the treatment they deserve, we really need to scale up the availability and affordability of epilepsy medicines. We need to improve community awareness so that by providing correct factual knowledge about epilepsy. And lastly, I think it is extremely important to talk about legislation, because the right legislation can ensure that people with epilepsy have proper rights and can live in a better world.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking, and telling us so much regarding epilepsy. We're going to slip into a short break right now. And when we return, we're going to talk about some myths and misconceptions that are very common regarding epilepsy. Stay with us. Welcome back. Dr. Chandra, starting with you, if you could state one myth or misconception regarding epilepsy and the correct facts.
Yeah. Epilepsy is a chronic neurological disorder, and it should be as similar to any other disorder. However, the epilepsy has a lot of social problems. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions in people living with epilepsy. And this could be in the form of that it is caused by evil spirits or supernatural power, or from the diseased puppy. And hence, one need to be careful that these are not myths, these are myths and misconceptions. And this will cause a lot of social problems, and it has social ramifications while joining the school or getting married or at the time of securing an employment. At the time of the school entry, they have problems. They may not be able to make friends because of this myth and misconceptions and social implications. Then at the time of the marriage, they may have a problem to get a suitable match. And at the time of securing an employment, there may be a lot of problems in getting a suitable jobs. And that is why epilepsy should be treated not only medically, but also with the social background into it.
All right, Dr. Mehendirata, if you could share, some misconceptions that you've heard.
There are so many, but I will like to share one. That is, it's often believed that epilepsy is a curse. This is a myth. Though epilepsy word comes to be seized from without, as if it's something from the outer world, the person is affected. The fact is, and the belief which should be conveyed from this platform is that it's a neurological disorder. Often there is a reason for it, easily treatable, and most of the epilepsy or seizures are controllable without difficulty.
All right, that's very important to get that message across. Dr. Cross?
I think one of the misperceptions is the fact that epilepsy is a single disorder and that the same happens in every individual. And that's not the case. There are many individuals walking around able to lead normal lives with the appropriate treatment. There are others who have much more in the way of problems, but that doesn't mean to say we still cannot help and treat the epilepsy. Individuals with epilepsy are, in the majority, normal, everyday individuals like anyone else. Epilepsy does not define them.
Absolutely, and that's an important message. Epilepsy doesn't need to define them. Dr. Vengama, if you could share with us any myths or misconceptions about epilepsy.
Yeah, the most popular myth associated with providing the first aid to a patient who throws an epileptic fit, most commonly everybody does, and which includes placing a metallic objects like keys in their hands and making them smell their shoes. These practices do not have a scientific basis and should be discouraged because majority of the seizures subside spontaneously. So public awareness must be generated regarding safe practices like removing the sharp or dangerous objects that can cause physical injury from around the patient, removing the tight constricting clothing and placing the patient in a position to prevent aspiration. This aspect has to be made available public.
All right, so important to know how to treat a patient going through a fit. Dr. Gagandi?
Yeah, so there is a very common myth that people or women with epilepsy should not get married. So this is completely untrue. In fact, women with epilepsy can get married. They can go through their pregnancies. They can have childbirths. They can feed their babies following the delivery. So they can do everything which a normal person can do. And so there is nothing that should stop them from getting married.
All right, Dr. Manjari?
Yeah, there is a very common, false perception that if a young girl has epilepsy and you get her married off, her epilepsy will be cured. Now, this is complete rubbish. What is true is that the epilepsy can be controlled with proper medication and care and, visiting the doctors. But what brings on the epilepsy, the triggers need to be avoided. The triggers are lack of sleep, excessive photic stimulation, or missing the doses, or, even taking over-the-counter medicines which can provoke seizures. So definitely, marriage does not cure epilepsy, medication does.
Right, so many myths and misconceptions. It's important to get that awareness across to people. I'd like to end the show by asking all of you on this occasion of International Epilepsy Day, a one-line message. And Dr. Gagandeep, I'd like to start with you.
So my message to people with epilepsy is that you should dream and try your best to achieve your dreams. For the simple reason that people like Alexander the Great and Napoleon could achieve what they did despite having epilepsy, and there's no reason why you cannot do that.
Right. Dr. Chandra, now on the occasion of International Epilepsy Day, what is your, I'd like you to give a message for families of people with epilepsy.
Families should treat these epilepsy people as same as any other members of the family. There should not be any discrimination against them, and they require empathy and not sympathy. That is my message on this International Epilepsy Day.
And Dr. Vengama, your message, to the general public regarding epilepsy.
Yeah, my message to public, taking the theme of this year International Epilepsy Day 2022, love someone with epilepsy because such unconditional love has the power to unite the care providers and responsible citizens and goes a long way in achieving the effective seizure control.
All right. Now, Dr. Manjari was speaking about women earlier and how they're married off thinking that epilepsy will get cured. So on International Epilepsy Day, if you could give a one-line message to women with epilepsy.
So my message is that women with epilepsy must be in constant touch with the neurologist, particularly when they are getting educated. They must become self-sufficient and they can marry and they can have children with the right advice and the correct medications. The attitude should be, so I have epilepsy, so what? I will still be happy and live a happy, healthy life.
Right, that's a nice positive message. Dr. Mehendi Ratha, on this day, what is your one-line message to children with epilepsy?
Yeah, equality, equality, equality. We call these who are suffering from epilepsy person with epilepsy, not patient. That itself says they are equal. So children must get their education. They must live their normal life. The other thing which I will also like to say to the parents, please don't believe too much on the neighbors, because in India everybody is a doctor except the doctors, number one. Number two, don't indulge too much into the Dr. Google. Dr. Google can be very misleading at times. So believe in doctors like us, like we are at your service. Please utilize our services.
All right, that Dr. Google message can probably be for anything and everything. Finally, Dr. Cross, I'd like to, have your take on what your message is to policy makers and governments, because that's also very key in terms of creating awareness and helping people with epilepsy.
Yes, the key message is that there is much that can be done, and by addressing services and service delivery to people with epilepsy, it can extend so much more beyond. The WHO is currently has drafted out an intersectoral global action plan for the next 10 years, which will need to pass through the next WHA in May. But if passed, will provide, this is for epilepsy and other neurological disorders. But what we see is that epilepsy and looking at services for epilepsy can act as an entry point for actually assessment and services for other neurological disorders. And certainly utilising this can really improve the lives of many of those who live with epilepsy.
And I think that's the message, that you can live with epilepsy. It's not, something that should stop you from living your full life. Thank you so much, doctors, for joining us, putting out your messages there, and hopefully it'll be very helpful to people with epilepsy, families who have a loved one who has epilepsy, and also to our policymakers. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching at home. Goodbye.